You are walking through your backyard. You see a line of ants marching across the pavement. You stop. You lean down close. You shout at them. "Hello, ants! Nothing happens! They keep marching. They do not turn around. They do not run away. They do not acknowledge you at all. So you assume they cannot hear you. And you are mostly right, but also completely wrong. Here is the surprising truth about ants and sound. They cannot hear you shout, but they can hear each other perfectly. They have their own acoustic world, a world of whispers, vibrations, and silent screams that humans can never experience. Let us get into the story of how ants hear, why they do not need ears like ours, and what they are saying to each other when we are not listening. The first thing to understand is that ants do not have ears, not in the way humans do. You will not find an eardrum on an ant's head. You will not find an ear canal or an outer ear flap. Ants are built differently. But having no ears does not mean having no hearing. Ants have evolved other ways to detect sound. They feel vibrations, and they are remarkably good at it. For decades, scientists were confused by ants. Early researchers like Lord Avebury, a British scientist who studied ants in the late 1800s, could never get ants to react to any noise. He tried whistles. He tried shouting. He tried banging objects together. The ants did not seem to notice anything. So many scientists concluded that ants were completely deaf. They believed that ants communicated only through chemicals called pheromones. And it is true that pheromones are a huge part of ant communication. Ants leave chemical trails for other ants to follow. They release alarm pheromones when danger is near. They identify nestmates by smell. But something did not add up. Many ant species have stridulatory organs. These are specialized body parts that allow ants to produce sound by rubbing one body part against another. The organ consists of a washboard-like set of ridges and a scraper. When the ant rubs the scraper across the ridges, it creates a faint squeaking sound. If ants are deaf, why do they have built-in instruments for making sound? That question bothered scientists for decades. It was not until the late 1990s that a researcher named Robert Hickling finally found the answer. Hickling was an acoustical engineer at the University of Mississippi. He was studying fire ants. One day, out of sheer curiosity, he inserted a small microphone into a fire ant mound and listened. He expected to hear the sounds of ants moving around, maybe scratching, maybe digging. Instead, he heard something completely unexpected: stridulation. The ants were squeaking. They were making sounds that Hickling could record and analyze. In one experiment, Hickling placed some fire ants in a plastic box with acoustic sensors. At first, the ants were quiet. Then Hickling introduced a caterpillar into the box. The ants immediately began producing low-frequency squeaking sounds. Then they attacked the caterpillar. The sound was an attack call. In another experiment, Hickling watched as one ant got its antenna caught between the wall and the lid of the box. He saw the ant moving its gaster, which is the bulbous part of its abdomen, up and down. The acoustic sensors picked up a squeaking sound that matched the video image of the ant's movements. Other ants quickly came to free their trapped nestmate. The trapped ant had produced a distress signal. The other ants had responded. This raised a new question. If ants make sounds, how do they hear them? They do not have ears. Hickling proposed a theory. Ants do not hear sound the way humans do. They do not detect sound waves traveling through the air in the far field. That is the normal zone of sound propagation, where sound spreads out in all directions and gradually weakens with distance. Human hearing works in the far field. Instead, ants operate in what Hickling called the near field. This is an acoustic zone very close to a small sound source, roughly the size of an ant. The near field extends about 200 millimeters, or about 8 inches, around the antenna. Within this zone, sound behaves differently. Air particles move back and forth with the sound wave, and the displacement changes rapidly with distance. Ants do not detect pressure changes in the air, which is how human ears work. They detect the displacement of air particles. They sense movement. And they use their antennae to do it. At the tips of an ant's antennae are hair-like sensors. These sensors can detect the relative difference in sound displacement between the left antenna and the right antenna. By comparing these signals, an ant can determine exactly where a sound is coming from and, remarkably, how far away the source is. This is something humans cannot do. Human hearing can determine the direction of a sound, but not the distance. We need to use visual cues or guess based on loudness. Ants, however, can calculate distance directly from the near-field signal. This explains why ants do not react when you shout at them. Your shout produces sound waves in the far field. The displacement of air particles is very small. The change in displacement with distance is gradual. An ant's antenna sensors cannot detect it. To an ant, your shout is nothing. It is not even a whisper. But when another ant squeaks from a few centimeters away, the displacement of air particles is significant. The ant can feel that displacement with its antennae. It can tell where the sound is coming from and how far away the other ant is. This is a perfect evolutionary adaptation. ants do not need to hear human noises. They would be overwhelmed by background noise if they could. The wind, the rain, the rumble of cars, the sound of your footsteps. All of that would be distracting and confusing. By evolving to hear only in the near field, ants have tuned out the world and tuned into each other. But the near field theory is not the whole story. Recent research has discovered that ants can also detect vibrations through other parts of their bodies. In 2025, a study from Okayama University in Japan made a groundbreaking discovery. Researchers led by Takahiro Murakami analyzed the auditory organs of leaf-cutting ants. They used fluorescent dyes to label sensory nerves. They found 3 candidate sensory organs that could detect sound. The first is Johnston's organ, located in the pedicel, which is the second segment of the antenna. This organ detects vibrations in the antenna itself. The second is the subgenual organ, located in the tibia, which is the fourth segment of the leg. This organ detects vibrations traveling through the ground or other solid surfaces. The third is the chordotonal organ in the femur, which is the third leg segment. This study was the first time in the world that scientists had analyzed the detailed structure of ants' auditory organs. They also conducted playback experiments. They transmitted artificially synthesized sounds at different frequencies through a platform that leaf-cutting ants were walking on. The ants reacted most strongly to sounds at 100 Hz, which is a very low frequency, well below the range of human speech. A separate study published in 2025 in Sweden focused on redwood ants. These ants were not previously known to have stridulatory organs. But researchers discovered that they do produce stridulation-like sounds, about 0.7 seconds long, rattling sounds that were generated repeatedly. When the researchers played these sounds back to other redwood ants, the ants slowed down their walking speed. The sound seemed to be a signal that changed behavior. Another study published in 2025 in the Journal of Hymenoptera Research analyzed vibroacoustic signaling in messer ants from the Maltese archipelago. The researchers recorded the sounds of 3 different messer species. They found that acoustic traits vary between species and even between geographically isolated populations of the same species. Ants from Malta, Sicily, Crete, and Bulgaria all produced slightly different sound patterns. This suggests that ant acoustic communication is more complex and more diverse than scientists ever imagined. Different species have different dialects. Different populations have their own variations. The squeaking of an ant is not just random noise. It is language. So what are ants actually saying to each other? Scientists have identified several distinct types of ant sounds. First, there is the alarm call. When a fire ant mound is disturbed, the ants produce a loud, agitated stridulation. This signal spreads through the colony and triggers a defensive response. Ants rush to attack the intruder. Second, there is the attack call. When ants find prey, they produce a specific sound that coordinates the attack. In Hickling's experiment, the ants produced a low-frequency signal before attacking the caterpillar. Third, there is the distress signal. When an ant is trapped or injured, it produces a different sound. Other ants hear this signal and come to help. In Hickling's observation, the ant with its antenna caught between the wall and the lid produced a distress signal, and other ants quickly freed it. Fourth, there is the recruitment call. When an ant finds food, it may stridulate to attract other ants to the food source. Wheeler, an early ant researcher, noted that the excitement of finding food almost invariably causes an ant to stridulate and thus attract other ants in the vicinity. There is also evidence that stridulation is connected to social complexity. The 2025 Japanese study found that the frequency of vibrational signals recorded from ants was significantly correlated with social complexity. More complex ant societies use more acoustic communication. The study also found that leaf-cutting ants that had their ability to produce vibrations inhibited were significantly less successful at maintaining their fungus gardens than ants that had their pheromone secretion inhibited. This suggests that acoustic communication is not just a backup system. It is essential. It is as important as chemical communication, if not more so. Why would ants evolve acoustic communication when they already have pheromones? The answer is speed. Pheromones are chemicals that diffuse through the air. They take time to spread. A pheromone signal might take seconds or even minutes to reach other ants, depending on distance and air movement. Sound, on the other hand, travels fast. Very fast. About 343 meters per second in air, or over 700 miles per hour. A stridulation signal can reach nearby ants almost instantly. For urgent situations like an attack on the colony or a trapped nestmate, speed matters. Seconds can mean the difference between life and death. Acoustic communication is the antithesis of an emergency alert system. As Hickling pointed out, it would make sense for ants to favor acoustic communication when time is of the essence. Because sound is faster than pheromone molecules diffusing through the air, ants may rely on it in urgent situations. This does not mean ants have abandoned pheromones. Far from it. Pheromones are still essential for marking trails, identifying nestmates, and coordinating complex colony activities over long distances. But for close range, urgent communication, sound is faster and more direct. Ants have a multi-layered communication system. Chemicals for long-range, slow signals. Sound for short-range, fast signals. Touch for direct, immediate signals. Each sense has its role. Each sense is tuned to specific tasks. So the next time you see a line of ants marching across the pavement, remember the hidden world beneath your feet. You cannot hear them. You cannot see them signaling. But they are talking. They are squeaking and stridulating and sending vibrations through the ground. When one ant finds food, it calls to its nestmates. When an ant is trapped, it cries for help. When the colony is disturbed, 1,000 ants sound the alarm at once. They do not have ears, but they hear. Not your voice, not your footsteps, not the music playing from your phone. They hear each other. And in their tiny, silent world, that is all that matters. That is how ants hear, not with ears. But with antennae, with legs, with organs designed to feel the smallest vibrations. They live in a world of near-field sound, a world that humans can never truly experience. And that is why shouting at ants does nothing. They are not ignoring you. They simply cannot hear you.